up? What's happening on Friday? It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/at the Team 980. Thought we'd have a nice fun Friday talking about the NFL schedule release. That nice chat DMV video that the Commanders did. What about the road games? What about the home games? What are we excited for? Get a record prediction. No, we're not going to do a record prediction because we know now the order of the games. We've known what we think this team is and what the schedule is for a long time. But we don't even get to talk about any of that. I don't even get to go on my schedule tirade because Don Van Natta and Seth Wickersham have put their proverbial pens to paper, their fingers to keyboards, and we have new Dan Snyder news. I will tell you now, as we start this fine radio program on this fine Friday in the DMV, that Don Van Natta will be joining us in 10 minutes to discuss. What are we discussing? Well, the fact that the apparent holdup is not the financing of the Josh Harris group. The apparent holdup is not necessarily even the legal indemnity, although that is still on some level of question. It is the Mary Jo White report. The very report that the NFL, not any legal entity, not any federal investigator, not anyone but the NFL is a part of. And of course that's the case, because what would this be without another chance to have the NFL have preventable egg on its face? Ah, yes. The sweet irony of the fact that if they had just taken care of Snyder and done the thing that they promised to do with the Beth Wilkinson report, which is publish the entire thing. And there's been reports that, in fact, she recommended you should force this guy to sell. He's terrible. He's done terrible things. Pretty easy to do. All you got to do is look at this here evidence. Did they do that? Nope. And now here we are on May 12th, and at noon today, Don Van Natta, who will again join us in 10 minutes, and Seth Wickersham report that Dan Snyder and his lawyers are lobbying the NFL to limit the release of attorney Mary Jo White's report into sexual misconduct allegations and financial improprieties against the embattled Washington Commanders owner, sources told ESPN. That, the first graph of their story. To summarize, it is that, right? Snyder wants to have something similar to the Beth Wilkinson report, which was not actually a report. It was verbal findings given to the commissioner, and then the commissioner puts out some kind of summary, and Wilkinson has no way to actually reveal any of the details of her reporting. We think back to the congressional testimony and how much, yes, what we heard, kind of summary was bad, but the details of the stories is what really illuminated us into just how bad things were in Ashburn for so long. How involved Snyder was or wasn't in certain things, how other high-profile men in that organization acted in all kinds of untoward ways. That's what Snyder wants, is just the summary, something that the league can wash over and, oh, yeah, it was bad, we're going to find him again. Actually, never mind, we're not. We're just going to, he's sold the team, so we're going to move on. What Snyder doesn't want is the details. And I will just say this up front. The thing that is most striking to me in this report is that the team I don't want to call it stupid because that feels childish, very foolishly rebuts this report in a way that is nonsensical and defends Snyder when on almost every other account they have stopped defending Dan. Quote, unquote, from the story. This is like the third paragraph before it lays out in explicit detail how they got all this information and what they know about the Mary Jo White report. A Commander's spokesperson called ESPN's reporting for this story, quote, completely false and a blatant fabrication by someone with no actual knowledge of this matter. They have multiple sources in the story with direct knowledge of the matter. And I will also say that I have heard over the last couple of months from people around the team that the sexual misconduct allegations against Daniel Snyder were not in this report. They were, at least according to them, trying to bring the expectations down. Hey, don't be surprised if that stuff's not in there. I know people are getting really excited because they want to see Dan go down and they want all the sordid details and they want this and they want that and they want the worst things about Dan to be true, but it's just not a part of this investigation. That, according to this report, is complete and utter, I wish I could say the word that goes here on the radio. From the story, one of the main areas of White's inquiry dates back to 2009 when Snyders settled an allegation of sexual misconduct with a former team employee for $1.6 million. According to a 2020 report in the Washington Post, the former employee accused Snyder of groping her and asking her for sex and trying to remove her clothes aboard his private plane. Snyder has denied the allegations, calling them meritless. Last year, however, Snyder's lawyers unsuccessfully attempted to keep the woman from discussing the alleged incident with anyone, including White, by offering to pay her a second undisclosed sum. Brendan Sullivan, the woman's lawyer, told ESPN last October. The woman refused and has spoken to White and her team several times, sources told ESPN. I think it is important to note here as well, Brendan Sullivan is a don't bleep with him lawyer in D.C. When you bring up Brendan Sullivan's names around other people outside of sports who are players in D.C. or are at least vaguely familiar with any of the inner workings of power play in D.C., they go, oh, that dude? This isn't some, lawyer with the billboard trying to make a name for himself. This is one of the premier lawyers in the entire District of Columbia. One of the premier places to practice law in the world. By the way, Lisa Banks also quoted in this story saying that if the NFL folds on what Dan wants, there will be some issues. And in fact, it basically saying, do not do what you did with the Beth Wilkinson investigation. And she joined Grant and Danny about 20 minutes ago and had her reaction to Snyder and his lawyers lobbying to do just that.
I guess I have two reactions. One is I'm not surprised. And two, I think it demonstrates just how scared he is of what's in this report, just like he was with the Beth Wilkinson report. So it doesn't surprise me at all that he's lobbying to either kill the report or water it down in some way. But I'm still holding out hope that that's not going to happen because I think, as was pointed out in the ESPN article, he doesn't really have any leverage here. He has no cards to play. He has no way to keep this from coming out. As far as I know, there's no common interest agreement. This is a report for the NFL to put out or not put out, and Goodell has said multiple times he's going to release those findings, and Mary Jo White has told my clients multiple times that she only took this gig because she was promised that her results would be made public.
So there are two factors at play here that I want to lay out, and then we will get to Don Van Natta coming up here in just a moment, who, of course, co-authored with Seth Wickersham this ESPN report. One, the women that Lisa Banks represents and Brendan Sullivan, his client, who accused Snyder of sexual misconduct, sexual assault on that plane in 2009, participated in the Mary Jo White investigation because they were promised there would be a report. I wonder if there is legal recourse if they are not satisfied with that. If whatever comes out is similar to Beth Wilkinson and they say, hey, this isn't what we signed up for. We didn't sign up to participate in a sham investigation. So that is thing one. And I don't know if Grant and Danny asked Lisa that. We will have more from Lisa later in the show. And that happened obviously just before we went on. We were working on some stuff that we were preparing, so haven't had a chance to fully make our way through the interview yet. But we will have more from Lisa later in the show. That's thing one. Thing two is it's just another reminder that the NFL cell-phoned here. The NFL could have fixed this a long time ago by kicking him out of the league when Beth Wilkinson had her findings. There was plenty in that report. They gave him the biggest fine in league history. You're telling me they couldn't have indefinitely suspended him for real, not the fake suspension that he got? They could not have indefinitely suspended him to make him sell or just held the freaking vote? No. But this is where we are. because the NFL, again, refuses to just do the right thing that is, quote unquote, the hard thing that isn't that hard. Vote out the guy who's causing you a zillion headaches, and especially when you have an owner ready to pay you $6.05 billion to take over the franchise. This should not be this hard. It is. It is a joke. The NFL has so much egg on its face, and if they were capable of shame, they would be embarrassed enough to quit all of their jobs in the league office. And yet, here we are again. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app. Don Van Natta wrote the story. He joins us next. Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well, youtube.com/@theteam980. And joining us now, the man who blew up our rundown, which is fine. I will not hold it against him, especially because, well, he's joining us again and is so gracious with his time when he and his writing partner, Seth Wickersham, write these big bombshell stories for ESPN. It is Don Van Natta Jr. Don, welcome back to the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Great to be with you today.
So there's a couple things that really stand out from this story to me. We spent the first segment of our show talking about it. The basic, tenet being that the Mary Jo White investigation is the biggest holdup remaining. And I thought it was very interesting the detail you and Seth were able to garner about that investigation, because the team, I think, at times has pushed back and said, like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. And both to the Washington Post and to you guys, they vehemently disagree with kind of your assessment of this Mary Jo White report. So what can you tell us more about what is actually under investigation here and what kind of damage it could do to Dan Snyder?
Well, the investigation is actually quite sweeping. It's quite broad. Mary Jo White began the investigation 15 months ago in February of 2022, and she's investigating very specific allegations of sexual misconduct or sexual harassment involving Dan Snyder personally. The first one is a 2009 incident that allegedly occurred on Dan Snyder's plane. Former employee accused Snyder of groping her, asking her for sex, and trying to remove her clothes aboard his private plane. There was a settlement to this former team employee who made these allegations for $1.6 million. We reported for the first time last fall that Snyder was attempting to pay her an undisclosed sum again to keep her quiet so she would not speak to Mary Jo White and Mary Jo White's investigators. She steadfastly refused that offer, and she spoke to White and her team several times, we've reported today. There's a second allegation, the Tiffany Johnston allegation. She's the former Commander's marketing manager and cheerleader. She alleges that she was sexually harassed by Snyder personally as well. She said this, made these allegations back in February of 2022. Craig, you may remember that Snyder harassed her at a team dinner, put his hand on her thigh, and pressed her toward the limousine. So those are the two sexual harassment / misconduct allegations made directly against Snyder that Mary Jo White has been investigating. She has spoken to both of those women multiple times. She's also investigating financial improprieties, as we understand it. I don't know that much about it. I know there's quite a few allegations that have made about it. We've reported on some of them, including that $55 million credit line. And so that's the scope of it. It's a broad scope. It affects Snyder personally. And our information from very good sources, league sources, including, by the way, a source close to Snyder's camp, is that this report that Mary Jo White, we're told, is very close to completing, that Snyder and his lawyers are lobbying the NFL to limit the release of the findings by Mary Jo White. And this is the main remaining issue between Snyder and the NFL in moving forward with the sale of the team.
So I also just find it so interesting, Don, and I don't know how much you can say because obviously you're not going to reveal specific sources, but I just want to parse a little bit of language here. It's right at the top of the story that, a Commander's spokesperson called ESPN's reporting for this story completely false and a blatant fabrication by someone with no actual knowledge of this matter. And then you spend the next however many paragraphs laying out your very intimate knowledge of the matter. But, in so many things around this sale and around Dan, the longer it's gone on, the less the team specifically has pushed back. Yet the Washington Post report along similar lines in February, and then your report with new details today. Why do you think that the team, and I'm guessing this is someone from the team, not someone from Snyder's camp, because you call them a Commander spokesperson, is so vehemently pushing back against this very report?
It's a good question. First of all, the statement that was given to us by a Commander spokesperson says one person has it wrong. That's a mischaracterization of the facts that we brought to the team. We have multiple sources who are in a position to know that this is a remaining issue between Snyder and his lawyers and the NFL and what's going to happen specifically with the findings of Mary Jo White's report. So it's a mischaracterization on the part of the Commanders spokesperson and saying we just have one person. There's multiple people. I want to say that at the top. Now, why they're specifically pushing back so hard on this, I don't know. But my follow-up question for the Commanders and for Snyder and his attorneys is a very simple one that we didn't get an answer to. Are you willing to say on the record that the full Mary Jo White report, or all of the findings that Mary Jo White finds, the factual findings after a 15-month in-depth investigation, can be made public? They have not answered that question. I don't know what their position on it is. All I know is they're pushing back very hard and vehemently, as you point out, Craig, on the assertion that this is a remaining issue that is being batted back and forth between Snyder's lawyers and the NFL.
Don Van Natta, ESPN, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So the other thing that I think is so interesting about kind of this process is Lisa Banks is also quoting your story, of course, the attorney for the 40 former employees. And having talked to some of those employees, and you don't even have to talk to them, all you got to do is read their Twitter accounts, it was very clear that like Megan Imbert, Melanie Coburn, they agreed to participate in the Mary Jo White investigation after the disappointment of Beth Wilkinson's report and no actual report coming out, under the premise that this was going to be a full accounting, that there would be full findings and a full report produced. If the NFL were to try to placate Snyder here, are they exposing themselves to a lawsuit from Lisa Banks under some kind of, participation granted under false pretenses? I don't know what the legal terminology and what statutes could apply there, but is there any exposure, as far as you know, in talking to Lisa Banks for this story?
Okay, I did not ask her that question, Craig. It's a good question. Just what I know about the law and having been a journalist now for 35 years, I think certainly that is potentially an option at play here. But I didn't ask Lisa Banks that specifically. But I do want to tell you and your listeners that Lisa Banks, when I spoke to her last night and again this morning and presented her with the information that we have, she's unequivocal in saying that if the findings that are released are the complete findings that are drafted by Mary Jo White and not the league, that's one thing, meaning it's okay. But if, as she puts it, if the league releases and these are her words, a truncated, watered-down version of the findings that are drafted by the league, similar to what we saw back in July of 2021 with the NFL's press release that was put out about the Beth Wilkinson report that, of course, we never saw, then, as according to Lisa Banks, as she puts it, we have the big problem. So there is a lot of concern by Lisa Banks, who, of course, represents about 40 former employees and ex-team cheerleaders, with how the league is going to handle the findings of Mary Jo White's report. It's my information, from speaking to sources, Craig, I think we reflected in today's story, that the two women who make these allegations against Snyder were assured during that investigation by Mary Jo White that her report, or at least the complete findings, are going to be released. So, again, this is an issue, I think, right now for the NFL. And as we reported, Snyder and his attorneys are pushing back and trying to limit as much as they can and persuade the NFL to limit actually what comes out in this report. And, it's been months. We've had Roger Goodell say, prior to the Super Bowl, I was at his press conference in Phoenix, and he said the findings of the Mary Jo report will be released. The question then is, how complete will those findings be?
Right, and he keeps using findings. He doesn't say that there will necessarily be a full accounting, full report, kind of a summary versus a transcript, if you will. So that'll be an interesting thing. But I do find it also interesting that Banks told you if there is at least a kind of a findings from Mary Jo White as opposed to one from Roger Goodell, that she would find that acceptable.
Yeah, what Lisa Banks told me is that she wants to hear directly from Mary Jo White that whatever findings are put out by the NFL of her report, that those are her findings, meaning Mary Jo White's findings in full. She wants to have an assurance that comes from Mary Jo White that whatever the NFL ends up putting out based on her investigation, her lengthy investigation of 15 months, is complete. Because according to Lisa Banks and anybody that looked at it, that was certainly lacking in what the NFL put out about the Beth Wilkinson investigation.
No doubt. So in the story, it says Snyders, quote, only leverage is to threaten his fellow owners that he won't sell the team unless the White report is killed, an option this person said he, quote, doesn't have. He isn't holding any cards, and I don't see how the league doesn't release the report. So that leads us to this roadblock, or I guess explains how we're at this roadblock now, where Dan still hasn't fully signed the agreement with Josh Harris. There's a bunch of stuff that obviously has to be worked out. What kind of timeline are we looking at, and how realistic is it that this stuff can get worked out? Because it doesn't seem like anyone's really saying like, oh no, this isn't going to happen. It's just this is going to be painful and complicated. So how do we get through the pain and the complications?
That I would only be able to speculate about. Everything involving Dan Snyder has been painful and complicated.
You're telling me, Don.
Right. But you know better than anyone, right? And so, I mean, I actually don't know how we're going to get to the end here. I don't know how dug in Snyder and his attorneys are on this. I know from the sources that I've spoken with and my colleague Seth Wickersham have talked with that this is certainly an impasse and a roadblock to getting to the end. Now, how Snyder, whether he will accept something less than what he's pushing for now, at the end of the day, I really don't know. I can only speculate about it. But as our source, you just read that quote, said, he doesn't have that much leverage. I mean, my understanding, the leverage that he has is simply just time. The way it's been put to me and put to Seth is that basically there are people around the league now, including people in the league office, that want him gone. He's not gone. Now, there are issues potentially we've heard about the financing, but our reporting shows that this is a major roadblock right now. And again, where's Mary Jo White's report? We have somebody who is in a position to know, saying she's all but done with her work. In the last 4 to 6 weeks, she did a final round of interviews with some of the key witnesses. And so, basically now the question is for the NFL, where's the report, or where are the findings, and and why is there a holdup? And I think that Seth and I went a long way today explaining what the holdup is based on.
Don Van Natta Jr., ESPN, with us, of course, award-winning journalist, has written so much about these stories over the last couple of years. And Don, one thing that I think has also been consistent, specifically when you and Seth have reported things, is there tends to be stuff that happens right after. Like, we get announcements, like there's a report, it kind of things build up. There's a loudness that happens right before there is news. More people start talking, and thus you guys get to a reportable threshold. I understand that's how that works, being a journalist, or at least playing one on the radio occasionally myself. So do you think that, in the next couple of weeks we could see the Mary Jo White report? Is this, people putting pressure on Dan to break through some of these thresholds, or is this just people fed up and we actually, maybe this isn't noise before something gigantic happens, and it is just a pure expression of frustration?
Well, I think it's a couple things going on, and that's an excellent question. There clearly is frustration with the pace of this, and people around the league, at the owners level, at the executives level, people on Park Avenue in the league office are frustrated at the pace. This has been an extremely slow process when you compare it to the Broncos sale and other team sales. It's complicated for a lot of the obvious reasons that we know about, but there is frustration, and certainly there's frustration with the fact that, as we've reported, Snyder and his attorneys, want a say in precisely what is released by the NFL on what Mary Jo White finds. But there's also a sort of unofficial deadline here. We're just less than 2 weeks away from the next owners meeting. The spring owners meetings begin on May 22nd in Minneapolis. And I think that was always the target date for the sale to be tentatively approved. And from what we're hearing, they may not make it. Now, they still might. We're 10 days away, but they may not make that. And I think that's also a little bit of what's driving some of the frustration and some of the things that Seth and I picked up this week on this story.
Off the Snyder beat for just a moment, but related, because obviously they can put a lot more pressure when the Harris Group has all their I's dotted and T's crossed. I'm sure you also have been talking to people in the background about that side of this. What can you tell us about where the Harris Group is and their ability to plug some of the holes in the financing? And they've got so much money in terms of human beings involved, it's net worth. but how do they plug those financial holes and get their side shored up so they can hopefully, if need be, ramp up the pressure on Snyder?
Yeah, my understanding is that the financial issues are not as great as has been reported by some folks, that clearly there is a concern that there are so many limited partners to get to the cash threshold that is needed with the Harris Group. So obviously due diligence needs to be done on where's that cash coming from and things like that. And my understanding, the Finance Committee meeting this week, that was some of what was discussed, and the Washington Post reflected that in their reporting over the last 36 hours or so. But again, Craig, my understanding is that is less of a concern. There's still due diligence that needs to be done. But as we reported, we had somebody in a position to know that told us unequivocally in our story today that the last remaining major roadblock is this issue of what's going to happen with Mary Jo White's report. I believe the indemnification piece of that is also part of it. But it is precisely what's going to happen with the report and those findings as we report today on ESPN.com.
So I'll wrap up with this, Don, and I feel like I might have asked you this before, but I just keep landing in the same place with this story, which is if they had just taken care of this years ago, aka when the first reporting came out from the New York Times and the Washington Post about all the things that happened, and there were subsequent investigations. And even if you want to say at the point that the Wilkinson report comes out, or the Wilkinson report is presented to the commissioner, if they had said, this is untenable, this is completely against everything we stand for, this is a liability, whatever the reasoning is, to throw Dan Snyder out of the league then and just grow up and vote him out. They're not here right now. We're still not talking about this in May of 2023. As you one, is that a reasonable opinion to have? And two, as you've talked to folks around the league, specifically other owners, is there any regret that they didn't push harder years ago so that this could have been done and over with possibly by a year or two by now?
Oh, well, first of all, there's no doubt that there could have been a much stronger response by the league in the summer of 2021 when Beth Wilkinson's investigation was completed than what we saw. Snyder was suspended in air quotes for an indefinite amount of time. His lawyer, John Brownlee, has on the record saying that Snyder, that suspension actually was lifted as early as November of that fall. So if you take Brownlee at his word, Snyder was only suspended for 4 months for some very serious findings by Beth Wilkinson, none of which we saw. There's been some reports, as you know, Craig, that suggested Beth Wilkinson actually recommended to the league that Snyder be forced to sell the team. Mm-hmm. So as we know, that didn't happen, right? And this has gotten worse. I reported earlier this year, you and I talked about it on your show, that federal prosecutors in Virginia are investigating financial improprieties by the team, including a secret $55 million loan that Snyder's limited partners claim he took out that they didn't know about. That's still happening. That investigation is ongoing, as I understand it. So there's a lot here. Whether there's regret, of course there is. There's people around the league that don't like Dan Snyder. We reflected that in our report last October, our in-depth report about Snyder telling people he had dug up dirt on fellow owners, as well as the commissioner. And, you can go back, anybody can go back and read some of the quotes that were in that story. I mean, he didn't have that many friends in the league back then. So there is some regret there among owners that this has been allowed to play out in a way that has been embarrassing to the league and the owners, and they want it done with. As I said earlier in our conversation, they've had it, they want it over with, and the question is, what's left? And one of the major things as we report that's left is Mary Jo White's report and her findings and what happens with them.
Yeah, it seems as if he's got no friends and allies left, that they should do what they want, and if he doesn't do what they want in response to that, they should just vote him out. But I guess they don't want to do that. Like that's the thing I don't get. Do they not realize they have all of the leverage?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it's one of the things in my conversations with sources this week, as well as with Seth's conversations with his sources. A lot of it's about leverage, and I kept pressing people, what's his leverage here? I was asking it again earlier this morning of a couple of sources. One source said, well, timing, and it's like, well, what do you mean timing? Well, he can drag his feet.
It's the Hoffman Show on a Friday on the Team 980. Streaming live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are also on YouTube at youtube.com/@theteam980. If you missed our full interview with Don Van Natta earlier, we will put it up on YouTube. It will be in our podcast feed as well. But breaking news just moments ago, the Washington Commanders have officially entered a sale agreement. So Tanya and Dan Snyder have officially entered a sale agreement with Josh Harris. It will now, of course, go to the league for final approval, and it won't be approved at the earliest until the next league meetings in Minneapolis. But at this point, those are only 10 days away. Our show 2 weeks from now will be on May 26th. We could be celebrating the Josh Harris era on that Friday. It could be a couple of days old by that Friday, May 22nd, the day those meetings start in Minneapolis. The report first from Adam Schefter at ESPN, but it's an official statement. I'm just reading from ESPN.com's story here. The deal not only includes the team, but also FedEx Field in Landover and the team's practice facility in Ashburn, Virginia. The Commanders, of course, are seeking a new stadium somewhere, whether that is in Landover, somewhere in Virginia, or in D.C. That's kind of the next big domino to fall when Harris ultimately takes over and gets to work. But the statement reads as follows from the Snyders. We're very pleased to have reached an agreement for the sale of the Commanders franchise with Josh Harris, an area native, and his impressive group of partners. We look forward to the prompt completion of this transaction and to rooting for Josh and his team in the coming years. Harris released this statement in part. On behalf of our entire ownership group, I want to express how excited we are to be considered by the NFL to be the next owners of the Washington Commanders and how committed we are to delivering a championship-caliber franchise for this city and its fan base. Growing up in Chevy Chase, I experienced the first-hand excitement around the team, including its 3 Super Bowl victories and long-term winning culture. We look forward to the formal approval of our ownership by the NFL in the months ahead and to having the honor to serve as responsible and accountable stewards of the Commanders franchise moving forward. Now, interesting news comes in this statement as well. Harris thanks not only Mitchell Rales and Magic Johnson and some of the other owners that we knew, some of the limited partners, but also David Blitzer. Blitzer is his partner in the Philadelphia 76ers and the New Jersey Devils. In those, he has a much bigger role than I think he will have here. This is Harris's deal. But I do wonder if some of these financial holes that have been apparent or could become apparent in this bid over the last couple of weeks are now filled by David Blitzer. Say it was $250 million or so for a guy as rich as David Blitzer. Does he just come in and be like, look, we're good partners. We know what we're doing. Some of this is already intertwined anyway. Apparently, some of the financing might be through some of the other sports ventures. So let me just get in. Let's clean this up. Let's get it done and move forward. Now, of course, the main story that we were talking about today before this broke was the ESPN report from this morning. And Don Van Natta, who just joined us, told us in that reporting that he was talking to people this morning about these things, about Mary Jo White and her investigation and Dan Snyder's pursuit of whether it's fully killing that investigation or whether it was mitigating it, whatever it may be. I wonder if, I wonder if that was being discussed and there was some final hurdle where, people got their message across through this story and now Dan was like, okay, we're good. Or was, did this move the needle in some way? Did this cross, what kind of agreements, really, I guess this is the question, what kind of agreements were reached? For months, this deal has not only been down to the finances, which the NFL has been working on for the better part of a month now since Harris formally submitted, or informally, I guess, submitted the bid to the league for review. But it has also been the indemnification piece. It has been the Mary Jo White report. It has been some of these details that are so unique to this sale. And I wish I had answers for you. I wish I had a take. I wish I had analysis. I wish I had anything to tell you how this got done. But at the end of the day, I think, all most of you care about, if we're being honest, is it did. It's done. And now it is just a matter of formality. And I think what this does today is readjust the timeline once again. This agreement does not happen. This thing does not come out if those things haven't been sorted out. It also does not come out if, considering the league has been working on this behind the scenes, if the financial parts of this weren't sussed out this week. The finance committee obviously poked some holes earlier in the week. Okay, here are the holes. We now know them. Here are our proposed solutions, whether that was adding David Blitzer to the group, whether that was rearranging some things around. We'll probably find out over the next hours and days. But that is, those have been sussed out, and thus we get to this agreement. And we finally reach the end of the Dan Snyder era here shortly. And I think the most encouraging thing in this statement from Snyder is we look forward to the prompt completion of this transaction and to rooting for Josh and the team in the coming years. I don't care who Dan Snyder roots for. I care about they look forward to the prompt completion of this transaction. So that is the news. I'm not going to go back through the entire 20-minute monologue that I wrote for when this sale was announced months ago. It's just and it's weird too, because in some ways this is the day, in some ways that was the day, in some ways May 22nd will be the day. I do think it's funny, Anthony, ironic perhaps, that how many different reporters did I ask what's going to come first, the schedule release or an official sale agreement? And all of them said, I think it's going to be the schedule release. And they got it by a day.
Yeah, I mean, hallelujah, dog.
Yeah.
It is time. I don't care really when it came. I'm just glad that it's finally here, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that's on some level, that's how most fans feel. I mean, I've got a little bit more insight to these things, having been a reporter and covering them, than the average fan. But in general, I feel like anyone who had any reservation, you want to know who I want to call? I want to call Nick Ashew, right? Remember the day this came out, and Nick, who obviously longtime host with us on the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fan, and now doing the national show on BetMGM tonight. And Nick was like, I intellectually know better. But in my heart of hearts, until it's done, until he's gone, until he said, I'm selling, I can't celebrate. My champagne is on ice. I wonder if, tonight's the night that the champagne comes off the ice, or does it take the official one in May? Because I think what you can do now, if you're a Commanders fan, is you can exhale. You can finally go, yep, he's selling. He agreed to sell the team today. That is what happened today with this announcement. Again, direct quote, quote unquote, from Dan Snyder in this release. We are very pleased to have reached an agreement for the sale of the Commanders franchise with Josh Harris. That's it. He's not going back now. He never was. But that's not really the point right now. The point is, now even the people that doubted know, hey, it's done, it's over, and now it is merely waiting for the formality. And then we get on to the next bits of business, right? The next bits of business being the stadium, being, seeing what this team is on the field, actual, football, and then what that means for the Ron Riveras of the world. Now we get to see what this means for, for Jason Wright and some of the other folks that work in the organization. Do they stick around? Do they not? Depends on how they do their jobs, and those conversations will be had over the weeks to come and the months to come. That Harris ultimately gets in there, sees what he sees, and makes his decisions about the direction of this franchise on and off the field moving forward. But for now, the news: Josh Harris has agreed to buy the team. David Blitzer is joining him in this. That's new, and we'll see if there's more information that comes out about that. And we'll continue to get reaction. Magic Johnson, I know, put out a tweet as well. Of course, part of the ownership group. We'll continue to follow this story for the rest of the show. Are we keeping Standig next? We're supposed to talk to Standig next about all kinds of stuff. So we'll have Ben Standig on next. Is Russell still hanging out? He might pop on. He was sitting in the bullpen. I'm obviously doing the show from home today, so I don't know what's happening at the station. I'm just sitting here in in the Take Command studios, talking with you. Take some tweets, YouTube comments at all as well. Calls later in the show, 301-230-0980. Can you finally exhale? Dan Snyder has entered an official agreement to sell the Washington Commanders to Josh Harris, and we're talking about it on the Team 980.
Daniel Snyder has agreed to sell the Washington Commanders.
We're gonna have a good time tonight.
Celebrate with us on the
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Top story today, the Commanders have officially been agreed to be sold. What a silly way we have to say this for the next couple of weeks. But Josh Harris has officially entered an agreement to sell the team, or to buy the team from Dan Snyder. Let's talk about it with someone who covers the team for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Our guy Ben Standig is with us. Ben, start off with the simplest of questions. What's your reaction to this news, and especially on the heels of the ESPN story earlier today, where it sounded like it might be a while? Apparently, not so much. We got an agreement. What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, it's like, first off, it's like what you said a minute ago, that it's an agreement to buy the team. The league still needs to approve it, and we'll see what hurdles potentially exist in that regard. And this is where, like you mentioned, the ESPN report, we're discussing, is indemnification still something that Dan Snyder is making as a final major hurdle, things like that. So we'll see just how far along the line, down the line we are, perhaps here in the coming days. That said, one thing to note about this, about what we heard today, is until today, we have not one time definitively heard the Snyders say they were selling. I mean, we all have talked about it, we've all written about it, we've all reported about it, but they actually haven't said that they were selling. All they told us was back at the end of last year was that they were, looking at potential transactions. And not to say that we didn't believe it was happening, but obviously a lot of people were skeptical and nervous, and just understandable, considering the reign here of Dan Snyder and all that it's meant. So I think at a minimum, that's where the celebration should be, that they are selling this team, and you've got to imagine the league will do whatever it can to get it over the finish line here in the coming, whether it's days, weeks, or I don't know how long. But I think that's ultimately, the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah, no, it's the kind of thing where for all the people, I used our buddy Nick Ashew as an example, because Nick was on the show a couple weeks ago, and whenever the agreement was agreed to, the non-exclusive one in April, he's like, I can't take myself to take my champagne off ice yet. He actually has a physical bottle. This was not a metaphor. He has a physical bottle of champagne, and he refused to take it off ice. And I get it, because if you've been through what this franchise has put you through as a fan for the last 25 years, then you want to hear it from them, and that is what today is. It's like, nope, we're doing this. It's agreed upon. Are you also reading this the same way I am, that this all of a sudden puts the Minneapolis meetings back on track as the place where this could get done, that there seems to be a lot of things that were agreed to and cleaned up, and Snyder saying, we look forward to the prompt completion of this? That do you think this gets done in Minneapolis in 10 days?
I would guess no, but this is the part that's weird about this is they've already done more legwork than I think is typical, meaning the league, than I think is typical for a deal like this. What we don't, because there was so much confusion and it was very unusual, what we don't know is, have they vetted all of Josh Harris's partners, right? I mean, that is a thing that they still have to do. And just because the Harris and Snyder have an agreement doesn't mean that the league is already saying, sure, we're good. Like this, we're all set here. Like, again, to go back to the, not even just the ESPN report today, but just in general, the idea of this Dan Snyder down with having all the Mary Jo White report out there. Last we had heard he had not agreed to talk to her. What about the indemnification should anything arise down the line? So I don't know if 10 days is enough time, but like I said, this has been an unusual amount of examination by the league already into this. So maybe we're further down the line, but I know when the Broncos last year reached this stage of an agreement in place, it was 2 months from that point before it got done. Again, different circumstances, but nonetheless. So I don't know if I think we're going to get a deal in 10 days, but that's why I need to know. I need to know how far along they actually are based on what's taken place already.
Ben Standing with us from The Athletic here on the Team 980. Now, you guys were at the facility today. It was rookie minicamp today. That's what we thought we were going to be talking to you about. You did have an all caps tweet about Emmanuel Forbes too. We're gonna have to couch that conversation about all caps rules in minicamp, rookie minicamp, nonetheless, for another day, Ben. But was there any inkling, like amongst the media scrum, amongst Rivera, amongst anything that this was coming today?
Not unless people were, keeping things close to the vest. I mean, we, obviously amongst ourselves discussed the ESPN report and whether it really moved the story along or not, because, we've already been talking about indemnification and Dan Snyder, maybe not wanting to have all the information come out. I think on some level for me, the idea of Josh Harris, his group getting the money together and how is that going to work almost seemed to be as much of a complication as the rest based on some of the reporting that's been out there over the last few days. We still don't know exactly how many partners he has. He listed some of them in his part of the statement, but not all. So, we walked off the field. We got back into the media room. We're all fetching about how hot we are and out of shape we are and things like that. And as we're sitting down to figure out what we're all going to write, here comes the news, and everybody's plans immediately got tossed out to the point we were going to have Emmanuel Forbes and Ricky Stromberg, their third-round pick, come into the media room to talk to us about an hour from when the statement broke, and we just told PR, you can go ahead and cancel that. That's not going to be a thing today for us.
Congrats, Emmanuel Forbes. You found a way out of your first media session as a pro. Good for you. Already creating turnovers, Ben.
The all caps thing was purely in jest because I know people get annoyed by that, but he did make the exact play that everybody was wondering why they got him. So that was me having fun, and because the outside world can't see it, but who knew? An hour or so later, that would be extremely irrelevant.
Yes. Ben Zanig with us from The Athletic for just another minute or two here on the Team 980. Then we'll turn it over to your calls, 301-230-0980. Also let you know we'll be live and local throughout the evening tonight on the Team 980. I'll let you know the lineup in just a second. But, Ben, what to you is next? Like, what is, whether it's the next thing for Harris, the next thing that happens in this process, like, what I honestly, and partly, I guess mainly because of the mind frame I was in. Like, we had Van Natta on the show. We were talking about that. That was where my brain was to start the show. These massive questions of how is this going to be resolved, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's the announcement. So, like, I have more questions than anything at this point of, the indemnification and the Mary Jo White report and all that I just would kind of like to know. But, like, for you, where you're at, where you're approaching this from, what's kind of the next thing that you want to see happen or that you're curious about for this sale and ultimately the transfer of power in this process?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for the one part is like what I said a minute ago. How far down the line actually are they? I don't know. We'll get too many answers. They are. You mentioned the Minnesota meeting coming up. Perhaps if we don't have more details by then, we'll have some people there giving us some more insight how long this takes. But I think also, from the Josh Harris side, okay, if he's going to be the new owner, his group, we need some more insight from them. We have not heard from Josh Harris, obviously, this whole time. The statement today was the first time, right, we've heard anything from him directly about this. Fine, he's going to be the lead partner, but I don't think he's going to tell us about his plans for the coaching staff or if they're going to change the name. But do we get some sense of anything about his outlook for this team? I just think that we got to start filling in those blanks a bit more than I think that would be really helpful to fully understand what's about to happen here because, everybody's celebrating that Dan Snyder is leaving and go nuts. I get it, of course. But at some point it'll be, okay, well, let's learn more about the new guy and the new people who are going to be in charge. And I think that's going to be really fascinating to see what we learn from them over the next few days and weeks.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, appreciate your time. I know it's a crazy day. Maybe eventually you'll write that Emmanuel Forbes story. Probably not. Who cares? But in the meantime, enjoy your weekend and appreciate the time on a crazy one.
I really was no joke, the one person I interviewed after the field was a UDFA player. That's how my world from a UDF conversation for this. It is the definition of a 180.
Nice. All right, man. Appreciate it.
Yep. See ya. Thanks.
All right, Ben Standig, everybody with us here on the Hoffman Show. Anthony, let's take calls next. Let's open it up. We've reached out to a bunch of guests as well. Of course, the breaking news, Dan Snyder has entered an official sale agreement with Josh Harris to buy the Washington Commanders. We're talking about it with you next. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app.
DC has a new...
right, it's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streams popping today on YouTube as well, youtube.com/@theteam980. Let's go to the phones. It's official. Dan Snyder has agreed to sell the Washington Commanders to Josh Harris and company. That is not a report. That's not unofficial. That's not non-binding. It's not non-exclusive. It's not any of the non-things that the other things have been. This is the one. This is the actual agreement. Now, it does have to become approved by the league, but there is an agreement between Snyder, the Snyders, and Josh Harris and his partners, and that is now headed to the league for approval, hopefully at the league meetings in Minneapolis, but we will see. I think Standing did a good job of discussing why this could take a lot less time than the Broncos sale did, like 2 months from the agreement. because they've already been doing so much work in the background. It's kind of been 2 months. I guess it's been a little under a month since April 14th was that agreement in looking back at it. But they're also in a rush to get Snyder out. Just please get rid of him. So that is where we stand. Could definitely happen in Minneapolis, but not guaranteed. We shall see. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. Tony, get us started. How you feeling on a monumental day?
This is a wonderful day, but then reality struck on me. And let me show you so you understand the parallel. When I heard about the sale being done, I felt like the Munchkins. Remember when the Munchkins were celebrating about the Wicked Witch being dead and everybody was throwing that mega party and everything? And all of a sudden the big bad green, well, I won't use that word because I might get censored, but she came down on that broom and everything was like messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was kind of saying. Maybe we're being real Munchkin-like right now. And until the Wicked Witch is toast and the champagne can be taken off of ice, then I think I'll be happy.
So, Tony, that's interesting because there still is obviously the finances and stuff that has to be finished vetting. But, like, I think the thing that so many people have been waiting on, and Tony, I appreciate the call, is Dan to say that he's out, right? It's one thing to hear, and like I've been told by like team executives, hey, he's selling. Like there's no turning back now. This is not some game. Like it's not a partial sale, and he's selling. And so I have been in that frame of mind for a while, and have been telling people, anyone who will listen, whether it's in private conversations that like if someone meets me, they realize what I do for a living or find out or whatever, and they're like, oh, well, what do you think of Snyder? Is he actually going to sell? It's like, yes, he's selling. Like, it's happening right now. They're working on it. Or I told you guys the same thing here on the show. But realistically, to hear it from Dan is different. And I get that. I get that it is now much more real for people to realize, like, no, this isn't some big ruse. This isn't some big game. This is actually him finally getting his hands off this franchise, and now it is just a matter of paperwork and like backroom, lawyery, accountant type stuff. Not backroom dealing, but like just the grunt work of getting a sale across the finish line. And they've been working on this stuff actively for a while, and the league is highly motivated. So I still think that Minneapolis is on the table. We'll obviously see. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. Lap, how you feeling on this monumental Friday?
Hey, what's up, Craig? What's up, Southeast, man? I'm cool with it, man. I just don't want no more surprises, man. So I'm just kind of like trying to hang in there. There ain't no backdoor surprises or nothing, man. It's just always like it's too good to be true. And then, the announcement yesterday or the report or whatever yesterday. So just kind of iffy on it, man. But I'm excited. So I'm just hoping that everybody that has their part to play in for this to happen, that everybody holds up their end of the bargain, especially Dan. So we should see, man, and it continues to be exciting. And we can get past this, bro. We could just really focus on football. And that's what I want, just to focus on football. Hey, did you I know you got to look at that list, man, for the schedule. It's kind of brutal in there, man. What you thinking, man? You think we got a chance? Because I think we need to make the playoffs and get one of them wild card spots.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion on the team lab hasn't really changed based off the schedule. Like the people going through I'm going to do a mini version of this rant now. I appreciate the call as always. I'm going to do a mini version of this rant now because I'm not going to have the chance to do the full version today. If you spend your time doing the game-by-game schedule thing because the schedule came out and you think that things are different today than they were yesterday before we knew the schedule, like, what have you been watching for your entire life in the NFL? Like, that is just completely – like, we knew the opponents. We now know the order. We knew where games were going to be played. There are certainly things that you feel maybe a little bit better about, like a Denver early versus late, but we don't know jack diddly poo. And guys are going to get hurt and all that kind of stuff, which is why our plan for today was never to give you a record, a game-by-game. I think they're somewhere between a 7-10 and an 11 and let's see, they played that'd be 11-6 football team depending on health, and that doesn't change remotely, and it's not going to change until at least training camp when I actually get to see them on the field in some kind of meaningful practice and see what Sam Howell looks like there. Nevertheless, what it looks like 3 or 4 weeks into the season. That's my mini version of the rant. Our plan was to do a road trip draft because that's actually fun and something you actually learn about in the schedule, because if you're going to go to Los Angeles in September, that's less appealing than going to Los Angeles in December, where it becomes a pretty high thing because I hate the cold and I'm a giant wimp about weather. That's my short version of the schedule rant. As for the more important thing today, Dan Snyder, he's agreed to sell the Commanders to Josh Harris in an official agreement. The statements coming out just a little bit ago. And actually, I would like to pull up the full statement from Harris. I got to find it real quick. I know Rappaport had it. Rap sheet on the Twitter. Let's see. Update on timing with new info. There will be an update to the owners in May at the league meeting either way. If it's not ready for a final vote, the owners will reconvene in the coming months for a vote. Okay, that's that. League staff and the finances committee will review details of proposed Washington transaction. Any transaction needs to be voted upon by the full membership with 24 of 32 votes needed to approve the sale. So that's the latest from Rappaport on the reporting front. But here's the statement in full from Josh Harris. On behalf of our entire ownership group, including Mitchell Rales, my longtime sports business partner David Blitzer, and Irvin Magic Johnson, I want to express how excited we are to be considered by the NFL to be the next owners of the Washington Commanders, and how committed we are to delivering a championship-caliber franchise for this city and its fan base. Growing up in Chevy Chase, I experienced firsthand the excitement around the team, including its 3 Super Bowl victories and long-term winning culture. We look forward to the formal approval of our ownership by the NFL in the months ahead, and to having the honor to serve as responsible and accountable stewards of the Commanders franchise moving forward. Thank you to Tanya and Dan Snyder and the staff of the Commanders for their partnership and cooperation throughout the sale process. In addition to Mitch, David, and Magic, our extraordinary ownership group includes local business leader Mark Ein, Lee Ansley, Eric Holloman, Michael Lee, owner of Range Group, the Morgan family, owners of Morgan Properties, the Santo Domingo family, Michael Sapir, co-founder and CEO of ProShares, Eric Schmidt, former Google CEO and executive chair, and Andy Snyder, amongst others. Together, these individuals and families have the collective resources and shared commitment to support our vision for the Commanders. We look forward to running a world-class organization and making significant investments on and off the field to achieve excellence and have a lasting and positive impact on the community. That is the full statement from Josh Harris. So I think, again, it's super interesting that David Blitzer, the most obvious guy to be with him all along, is now part of this group. And I do wonder if that was to help shore up the finances of the group, the things that have been, questioned over the last couple of days by the finance committee and reported on by the Washington Post, et cetera. But in terms of the franchise value overall, like why is the league so entitled or so wanting to do this? Not just because the, obviously the let's call them embarrassments, debacles, liabilities as well for the NFL that Dan Snyder has caused. But Washington, when Dan Snyder bought the team, was the most valuable sports team in the world. Evan Novi-Williams, our good buddy from Sportico, tweeted this out. Now, this is NFL attendance-wise. They were number one. They were the most valuable team, again, in sports in 1999 when we bought them. They'll sell is probably the second biggest sale in sports history by the end of 2023. I assume Manchester United, if they sell in 2023, will sell for more. There are other franchises like the Yankees that, I don't think that we're going to see selling, but would sell for more. But it's still a very valuable franchise, but nowhere near what it was in 1999. It was number one in attendance forever as well. And then the decline started in 2009. They dropped from first to second behind the Cowboys, eventually down to fourth, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. They popped back up to second in 2016, or sorry, third in 2016, allegedly. And then 2017, they fall off. 2018, down to 6th. And then in 2018, they drop all the way to 27th. They're up to 20th in 2019. And then 2020, there's no attendance, obviously, because of COVID. 2021, they are 31st. 2022, they are 32nd. This team, not that long ago, was a lock top 10 in attendance, if not top 5. And they were that way for most of their 90-year history. They were as popular as it gets. They were printing money. And they now are this. And that is why the team cannot be sold fast enough, cannot be revived fast enough, cannot be invested in fast enough. And now we know that is going to happen thanks to Josh Harris. Again, the breaking news about an hour ago. Dan Snyder has officially agreed to sell to Josh Harris. They've entered a sale agreement. By the way, like, there's penalties for backing out of this agreement. Harris specifically, if he were to back out, has to pay like a breakup fee, so, according to the Washington Post. So, like, this is binding, this is exclusive, this is the deal. And we are covering it here, talking about it with you. 301-230-0980. Probably have some guests on as well. And then we're staying on live local coverage. Chris Russell is going to pick up again. Obviously, Chris was in 1 to 4 today. This broke after his show, so you get Russell, his take on this, and talking with him from 7 to 9. I think Toby Altizer is going to be on with Russell as well. And then Scott Jackson is going to be coming up at 9 o'clock to take you through the earlier or the later part of the evening. So live local coverage here on the Team 980, following us on the Hoffman Show. And we will get you some voices from around the DMV, obviously, talking about this as well. Your calls, those voices, next, the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, and always live on the free Odyssey app. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls, 301-230-0980. Also streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. Obviously, we'll have a ton of content up around this. Also, again, just a lot of alsos here, but reminder, we'll be live and local all throughout the night, so keep on celebrating with us. Chris Russell starting at 7. Toby Altizer will be with him as well. And then Scott Jackson coming up at 9 o'clock. Working on a couple of guests that we're hoping to get on over the next couple of minutes here. Also, a reminder that if you, like, the thing that we thought would be the main story today would be the Mary Jo White report stuff. And I still think that's relevant. I don't mean to, like, be a downer and go to something more serious when everyone's just kind of want to be like, yay, Wicked Witch is dead, or it's almost dead. Look, the Wicked Witch is under the house, and the house is falling. I know that that's kind of the vibe right now, but, you know, obviously how the Mary Jo White stuff comes out matters a lot to a lot of people, and you know, could matter to the franchise as well if there's any kind of fine, and they're not going to take away draft picks or anything like that out of this, because that's just affecting, like, if it's stuff that Dan did, then it's not going to then they're not going to punish Josh Harris. But I do think that, you know, figuring out how this deal ultimately came together is important. But the other thing I was going to say is, like, Don Van Natta and some of the new details of the scope of that report and things that were in that report today from Don and Seth Wickersham. We had Don on the show at 4:15. If you missed it, you can check it out on our podcast feed. Use the rewind feature. It'll be up on YouTube momentarily. I'll also tell you that we taped with Clinton Yates earlier today. We were going to air it at 6:30. We didn't talk. We talked about NFL schedule release videos and the NBA playoffs, and we're probably just going to throw that on YouTube. So Yates will be on YouTube for his Friday appearance. Very fun, great way to spend 20 minutes. Good vibes, just not the topic that's relevant anymore. So we'll get that up on YouTube here very shortly in one of the next commercial breaks as well. Also, just got this note. Megan Imbert, who obviously helped make this happen, is going to join Chris Russell coming up at 7:45. I think we're going to have Melanie Coburn on Monday as well. So that is something that, you know, as I pull up my notes from the day that we kind of celebrated this happening, right? April 13th was the day that Josh Harris officially agreed to sell to, or that Dan Snyder agreed to sell to Josh Harris. It was obviously at that point a non-exclusive agreement. There wasn't signed yet. All the things that have been done now, making today, May 12th, yet another monumental day in the history of the franchise, and for, you know, diehard Commanders fans in their lives. But I wrote then, you know, after 24 years, nearly a quarter century, and more. Anthony, by the way, sorry, Anthony's texting me in the middle of this. Let's get Nick now. Just go ahead and pop him on and shoot me a text when he's ready. So after 24 years, nearly a quarter century, more than a quarter of this franchise's rich history, Dan Snyder is on the verge of being gone. He is undoubtedly the worst sports owner in the history of this town. He's probably the worst owner in the history of the NFL. It is both on the field, off the field, and very off the field. On the field is obvious. Washington has mostly stunk during Snyder's tenure, and much of the lack of success is directly attributable to him. Almost immediately, it started with Charlie Casserly's departure, to the big-name signings that failed miserably, to the coaching carousel of failure. But then I went on to list about how there's just kind of this general off-the-field stuff that happened, and that's like kind of embarrassing, businessy type stuff. And then there's obviously the more evil, sordid stuff that happened where there were real victims of this. And, you know, if it had just been on the field incompetence and some business stupidity, even like suing fans and stuff, Dan Snyder still owns the team today. It's because he went to a place that no one else had, at least no one else had been caught. And he did it in an era where people are willing to be brave and speak up. And that is why this fan base is indebted forever to Megan Imbert and Melanie Coburn and all the women who spoke up and said, like, enough. This man doesn't deserve to have this franchise. This man hurt us. This man did things that you should know about as a fan. You shouldn't be rooting for him to be successful. We're not trying to say you can't root for the team. We're not trying to say, that this team needs to go away. It's this man needs to go away and the people that he empowered. And so many of them got driven out. And finally today, he has been driven out as well. All right, Anthony, do we have Ashu ready to go?
Yes, sir.
All right, Nick Ashu joins us now. Nick, is your champagne coming off ice?
Craig, it's the greatest day in DC sports history. I can't believe this is actually official now. I told you I was going to wait. There was some weird stuff going on behind the scenes. We heard that even today, right? It was like, wait a second. He's going to try and sit here and manipulate the deal and protect himself. And then the news drops. I am celebrating. I'm happy. The worst thing is, though, I'm actually not on BetMGM tonight, because I thought it was going to be a slow day. They're starting to take some little vacation days here and there, spend some time with the wife. And then, of course, Friday news dump. Here it is. I will be doing it on Monday. There will be champagne sprayed all over the studio. We're going to cover it in tarp if we have to. The bosses have given me clearance. This is a day I thought that would never happen. I never even could have imagined this dude wanted to pass it down to his kids, and he's gone. I'm in shock. It's now official, and it's all the emotion just running like a river, Craig. I feel so good.
If you break the cameras down there and that causes a delay in me getting cameras in my studio, we're going to fight.
I will cover everything with a tarp. Don't
Excellent.
You worry. I won't
Okay.
spray. I'll just maybe just trickle a little bit. I will chug champagne on the air. I don't care. I told them, you're not stopping me. This is the greatest day ever.
It is. It's so good. And, like for you, was there a breaking point at some point in your fandom where like you went from this is annoying to like this is a problem?
I mean, God, how many different times? I mean, it felt like that kind of like almost at the beginning, At first he comes in and you've got the team back in, 99 and 2000, and they got all this talent. You think he's treating it like a fantasy team, but at the same time you're going, well, this guy wants to win. And then, to me, it really was very early on. If I could pick a specific time, I would say it's probably once. But when you say they have a problem, like to say there was a problem, you kind of knew that a long time ago. But the Mike Shanahan RG3 era and the end of that really felt like there was no turning back. Like that felt like at the moment, okay, they brought in a winning head coach. We've drafted our franchise quarterback, and then that all eroded and fell apart. And you're hearing all of the stuff going on again behind the scenes. And then they move on and get another head coach, and you just go, this is never going to end. That was the one moment where it did feel like they maybe had turned the corner and there were going to be some adults in the room. And then at that, I just realized it was never going to be the case, and it just could not happen under him.
Right. So what's your thing now? Like obviously, step one, chug champagne. Got it.
Yes.
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 And then step two is what? Is it for you? Are you like a stadium person? Are you something else person? Rename the team, fire this person, that person. Like it's May. You're not firing Ron Rivera, but like depending on what job you think Jason Wright has done, you want to see a different direction on that side of the franchise. Like what's the next thing for you?
Well, first for me personally, it's collecting my thoughts and being able to speak in full sentences without just going all over the place. So after
the champagne will help with that.
The champagne will definitely help with that. To me, it's establishing a culture. That's really what this team needs. And I know that that's not something that can happen overnight, but bringing in some professionals that are true successes in sports and specifically the NFL, because they've tried this over the years with different people in the front office, and it's just never been taken seriously because, well, attitude reflects leadership. It's one of my favorite quotes from Remember the Titans, and it's so true. The attitude of that organization has always been trash because Dan Snyder's been there, even with Ron Rivera. And give Ron Rivera credit. He's not the guy to take them to a Super Bowl, but he was the guy to come in and clean up that culture and really start to build at least a respectable operation on the field. But they need that. They need in the front office. They need people that understand how to do, my God, Sean Taylor promotions. Can we have a real statue for Sean Taylor as opposed to a bunch of wire coat hangers that are tangled up with his jersey thrown on top of it? It's embarrassing. People that can come in and handle just stuff like that where the image of the organization off the field actually looks professional and well run. And when they can start to do that, then you take the next step. The stadium needs to be at the RFK site. I pray that they're able to make this work. it would be such a big deal to get it right back to where it was. That's something they wanted to do years ago anyway. Amazon Field at RFK was something that was their dream back in like 2019. And then we can talk about the name. Look, to have it another name, again, we've gone through 3 already, would be obnoxious. But if they come up with something better, they come up with something better and give it a fresh start all over again.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Obviously, they've also got a couple years to figure out if they, can be good as the Commanders and create the new memories. And if you still stink by the time you're about to open a new stadium, then maybe you do change it. Nick, I'm very glad we got your full-on emotion let out here on the Hoffman Show. We look forward to your chugging champagne on BetMGM tonight on Monday. Enjoy the weekend. I'm sure now that you will. Thank you for calling in.
I'm glad to be on with you, buddy. Talk to you soon.
All right, it's Nick Ashew, everybody. So we taped a segment earlier today with Clinton Yates on schedule release videos and the NBA playoffs. That's going to go on our podcast feed and on YouTube, and Yates is going to join us live next to talk about the news. Dan Snyder, Josh Harris have officially agreed on a deal. The Commanders will not be Snyders much longer.
You can listen to the Team 980 on your smart speaker.
Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app on a Friday. That'll go down in history in the DMV. Dan Snyder has agreed officially to sell the Washington Commanders to Josh Harris and company. That is an official sale agreement. It is binding. It is now pending the approval of 24 of the 32 NFL owners, which could come as soon as the league meetings in Minneapolis at the end of the month. Actually, 10 days from now, May 22nd, is when those start. To talk about it, Clinton Yates for his unusual Friday visit.
So, first of all, I just want to say to everybody listening, you guys do not understand how good of a job Craig is doing managing everything that's been happening from a news standpoint today as a host. When you've got interviews and breaking news that affects the previous interviews and then other people who want to talk about it, you're ringleading the real circus here. Good job, brother.
Thank you. I feel like I'm in the middle of a circus. I can't tell whether I feel like a clown yet or an actual ringleader, but I will take your kind words and I guess I'm doing a good job. It's finally done. Dan has said, I am selling. Does this change how you feel at all compared to a month ago when we talked about this and it was like, well, he's agreed, but it's not exclusive. There's still a lot of hurdles. This is kind of it. How do you feel?
You know, it's interesting because this is where I take off a little bit of the journalist hat and I come back to not just the DC native hat, but the sports fan hat and the former fan of this team hat. I don't know that I ever in my life have been a part of an experience that I felt I could describe any way other than a moral victory. That is basically exactly what's happened in this situation. And it's fascinating because overall, I think about this all the time because I'm like, would I care if he sold the team? Would I come rushing back? Would the memories all be there? I went to every single home game the last time this team won a Super Bowl, including both playoff games. I was a child. It was my formative experience with sports and with RFK Stadium. And still to me today, I'm just sort of like, man, I'm happy for my friends, and there's a long way to still go. So it's an interesting feeling, and I'm glad it's happening. But overall, I feel like this market, as in the D.C. market, is closer to an expansion market than it is anything else right now, between the stadium situation being what it is and, quite frankly, the state of the actual football team, which is ultimately the most important scenario of all.
Yeah, so when you say there's a long way to go and they're an expansion team, I think I know what you mean. I mean, it's also like, hey, there's a new brand. Like, they've lost so much of the fan base. In many ways, it does feel like starting over. But, like, if there's a long way to go, what's on the to-do list through your vantage point?
Stadium's got to be first, if for no other reason than the fan experience for all the people who fought so hard for it to happen at all. That's the kind of thing I think about now. All of these fans, what you have now, Gregory, for the Washington football franchise, the Commanders, you basically have diehards and nobody else. You've lost so many people. And I feel like whatever this new ownership group does, the first thing you do is you address the humans that have stayed. That is hugely important. And whether or not that's in whether you can get a stadium in one place or another, make sure you listen to those people as far as whatever the fan experience is going to be. That, to me, has to be number one, because otherwise you can't punish a group who actually hung around by then going on to say that you're sort of smarter than they are as to how you're going to do it. It'll be interesting to see how that relationship evolves over the course of the next couple of years, because, again, you got a lot to do before you're really in a place where you can act like you're, really contending for anything as far as NFL experiences are concerned.
So Clinton Yates with us, of course, ESPN, DC native, just as he just said, grew up going to the games at RFK, the whole deal. One thing that we've talked about, some on the air, some off of it, is the idea of holding on to the past, and it kind of ties into what you were just talking about, right? You still have all these diehards, and some of them are just like diehard football fans, but some of them are diehards who went through many of the same experiences you did as a kid, but kept them closer as their formative experiences and hold them closer to their identity as a fan than obviously you and many others have, who were like, I can't do this anymore, I'm letting go.
Right.
As Josh Harris takes over, where do you think the line is? And I realize this is an abstract question, but like, where is the line of holding on to the past and the things that people love about this team and still connecting to the diehards and having that fresh start that is so badly needed in so many ways?
It's going to be the single hardest part about what they do as far as off-field operations are concerned, because, again, you're a little bit hamstrung because the history is not something that we can really celebrate. What are you going to do? Celebrate the 50-odd years of a team with a racist mascot name, no matter how many rings they won? Or what are you going to do? Celebrate the subsequent 30 years when they didn't win jack, and then they still changed the name anyway? Like, it's a really tricky position to be in. And this is, again, where I think the people who support this team, and I don't just mean the fans who show up at the stadium at this point, I mean folks around town who have made that squad and that franchise a part of their identity. That's what you've got to tie into. You've got to tie into the actual human beings who care. And rightfully so, because it's a big part of who they are. It can't just be about, oh, my God, look at the brand, look at how cool we are, we're back. It's got to be about, these are the people that kept this there, and this is the reason why we decided we wanted it at all. That, to me, seems obvious, just in terms of how you want to interface with your fan base.
Yeah, and it's hard. I've seen this some other teams that have gone through rebranding and just as things change, people that have been supportive all along can feel left behind. And there's kind of a business decision you have to make of how much do we care about, and not that like, hey, we don't care, bleep you, right? But it's like, can you rely on a kind of cold-hearted business decision that the people that have hung around this long are going to complain but still come and spend the money and do the things anyway, while also recruiting the new people? And that's the balance there's no right answer, because it's going to be different through the eye of any beholder, depending on whether they're a new person, whether they're an old person, so to speak. And obviously there's a bottom line that is affected by all of that, because this is, at the end of the day, a business. But to me, that's such a fascinating thing. And whether it's Jason Wright or whoever replaces Jason Wright ultimately executing that vision, they've kind of got to make this decision of like, how much are we willing to, kind of piss off some old school fans that have hung through, who we know are going to hang through anyway, to recruit the people that have left. And by the way, new potential fans that are young and hopefully can become fans that are, whether they're new to the area or however they're getting new exposure to this quasi new franchise.
It's, and you're exactly right about that, because that's, again, where the moral victory comes in. Do you want to do the right thing, or do you want to do the thing that you think is going to work? And do you think that they're the same thing? And you don't have to go far to find an example, Gregory. This is exactly what Theodore Leonsis was dealing with the Washington Capitals. When they first moved downtown, and the whole, we're going to change the colors, rock the red, we got new guys. There are a lot of people that have been heading out to Landover for years that were like, what's all this? You know what I mean? It worked out. They ended up sinking 2 generations of fan bases between each other because they won a Stanley Cup. But, yeah, that is vital, and especially for a team that was ever 10 times, 1,500 more times more popular than that team was on the ice. It's going to be A1 as far as the matter is concerned off the field. How do you interface with the people that actually care and never stop caring? I think that's going to be the biggest question to ask of Josh Harris when he gets to town, because that's where it helps from being a local. At least he knows what it feels like on some level.
Brian Mitchell joins us in 5 minutes. Last question for Clinton Yates would be, can they do this without winning big? And I don't mean to say that I'm guaranteeing that they're not going to, but there's an element of luck that is required for football success. There's a lot of stuff that you can do on the business and marketing side that doesn't require any luck. It is enhanced by the good luck of your football team being good, which can be influenced by any number of factors, from your 5th-round pick quarterback turning out to be awesome to him being terrible, and then you get the number 1 pick in the draft, you get Caleb Williams next year. Those would be considered good luck, or the bad luck of him being somewhere in the middle, and thus you are stuck in the middle as well. So is there a way, I think of this question because of the Caps example you just brought up, that they can bridge that gap, that they can be successful and rebuild the brand without being super competitive on the field? Or is it completely reliant on that, and really all of the rest of this is completely ancillary and may not even matter at all?
It would help. It's not required. That's why fans of the Burgundy and Gold are who they are. After that run that I told you that I saw that team win when I was a kid, they made the playoffs once when I was in middle school, once when I was in high school, once when I was in college, once when I was in 20s, and once when I was in my 30s. These people still show up to some degree. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that you don't have a choice in that matter. And look, all I hope is that the people that come in respect what has been here and don't just take it for granted, as was what happened with the previous human being who claimed to be somebody that was looking out in the best interest of everyone, but in fact was just looking out in the best interest of themselves. The fun part about the NFL experience is enjoying it with your friends. At least make sure the people who have been doing that the whole time can continue to do so.
Very much appreciate you calling back in. And the really fun segment that we did at 2 o'clock today will be up on YouTube in a little bit.
That's great. I'll talk to you later, buddy. Have a great weekend, Gregory.
Thank you, sir. Clinton Yates with us here on the Hoffman Show. His Friday visit, a double dose of Yates. One of them is not going to make the radio, but that's okay. It'll be on YouTube and in our podcast feed in just a little bit. Brian Mitchell joins us next to react to the news here on the Team 980. Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. What a day, what a day. Breaking news, if you somehow haven't seen it by now. We have an official agreement between Dan Snyder and Josh Harris for the Washington Commanders. It is binding, it is final. Now, between those two parties, I think that's an important caveat here. It is binding and final between those two parties. Now, the NFL and the Finance Committee just have to work through the final details of Josh Harris's financing in this group, which we learned today also includes his longtime sports business partner, David Blitzer. We still don't really know what changed in terms of the Mary Jo White report. Like, Dan gives up his leverage here. He obviously doesn't have control over the process anymore. I think that changes, but we don't know if there was any kind of agreement about how those findings will be released. So there's still a lot to sort out, but this is official. Dan is now no longer in control of the process. It is up to the NFL, and to get reaction on that, we welcome in, of course, Washington football legend and host of B. Mitch and Finley on 106.7 The Fan, Brian Mitchell. B. Mitch, didn't expect to be working at 6 o'clock on a Friday, huh?
Hey, I didn't expect to, but you know what? I was expecting something today or sometime early next week.
Okay. Anthony, let's see if we can make sure B. Mitch doesn't sound like he's got a Darth Vader costume on. The phone does this every once in a while. Normally it works itself out. I'm not really sure. This is a hell of a time for it to happen. There's nothing we can do about it. But B. Mitch, hopefully in your normal voice. I know you've had this happen on your show too, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But what was your reaction to the news and Dan finally agreeing and us hearing from him and Tanya that they are selling the team?
Got to say your question again.
All right, B. Mitch, can you hear me? Here we go. All right, I think we got Brian back.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, and
good?
Yeah, no, sounds good now. You can hear me, I can hear you. All is well in Radio Land. So, what is your just simply like? What's your reaction? You hear finally from Dan and Tanya, like, yes, we are selling. It is as official as we're going to get until the final approval. What's your reaction to the news?
Well, I'm excited, and I kind of felt it was going to happen. I think a lot of the news we've heard over the last few weeks was people that just felt somebody got to write the other side of it. Everything was going so smooth. So, you know, in media today, everybody got to take that opposite side. They think that, you know, if everything's going good, they got to take the opposite side to make it good media. I don't buy that. I just think ultimately, I heard you talking just now, they never had control. They've been told basically they had to sell or else they're going to be voted out. So they finally got somebody that offered a legitimate deal, and they came to agreement with it now to move forward. And I just think the NFL been waiting on this. You know, now they can go ahead, agree on the all of the deal, and then move forward. Because I felt no matter what happened, Dan Snyder was not going to be the owner of this team as we move forward into next year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Brian. I think what was interesting is, you know, obviously like the Post and Don Van Naden, Seth Wickersham at ESPN, like they're talking to owners who are giving them real quotes and real feelings of how they feel. And I just found it so fascinating throughout the process how scared they were of Dan, because I agree with you. He had no leverage. They were going to vote him out if he didn't sell. I wish they had just done it, 2 years ago, and we could be talking about football right now. But it is kind of interesting to see how it plays out, where ultimately we do get to the point that we feel like we've been building to since October, I guess, when they announced that they'd hired Bank of America.
Yeah, I think, this sometimes, you got to go through the little the situations where, this guy's in charge and this and the other. But let's be real. Dan Snyder had gotten to the point where everything was pointing against him. And the NFL knew that. And the NFL has this little fraternity where they control what happens in that fraternity, not the government, not anybody else. So he was out. But we're going to allow you to save face. We're going to allow you to go out there and you decide what you want to do. We've heard the deal of the Brian Davis and all that crap. Come on, man. Don't nobody just luck into $20 billion, $50 billion. It doesn't happen. So when Josh Harris came in, a guy was a part owner of the Steelers. And if you start looking, Tepper, part owner of the Steelers. Other owners that got into the league, part owner of the Steelers. That's your way into the NFL. Josh Harris, the guy who owns other franchises. And then everybody brings in is worth at least $6 billion or more. And then Magic Johnson, who has a $6 billion or a $20 billion smile, he comes in. You can't beat that. You just figured that Josh Harris was the next guy because in the Denver Broncos deal, they offered 4.65. He said, I'll pay 5. They didn't give him the team. You could just think then the next one was his.
Right. And obviously we see now Harris willing to pay for his hometown team. Brian, you've been covering this team for a long time. You obviously played for the team for a long time as well, but you've been around it inside. By the way, also congratulations, you, Logan, and Chick, going to be on the pregame this year. That's going to be fantastic for all of us watching.
Appreciate it.
You've been around it for so long. If Josh Harris comes to you and says, hey, Brian, like, you've been around this team as long as anybody. You're a guy who knows what winning looks like. You've also seen what it's like in other organizations. Like, you played for a guy like Andy Reid. What do I need to do? What's your to-do list that you would advise Josh Harris to work on pretty immediately when he gets in as the owner of the Commanders?
Well, first off, hire football people that can handle the job. And don't think that you know everything, because I don't think anyone knows everything. I think Dan felt he knew everything just because he had success in another business. Then, allow, some people that are already in the building to stay in the building. They changed everyone when they walked in. They went from having, let's say, seasoned women and employees that knew the business of professional football, and they brought in young, attractive women that were just in there and didn't know the business of football, was trying to learn. And now they're losing the team because a lot of the stuff that happened with those younger women that did not know what was going on. And they got involved with stuff. And you know what? The rules are what the rules are, And I think they're dealing with stuff because they came in thinking they knew and thought they could use whatever they thought they could use to make something go forward. Allow the business people and the football people to do their job. And then do not become too close to any football player. I don't care if he's a quarterback or whatever. Let the coach, the general managers handle that situation. You stay away, in a sense.
It is amazing what happens if you actually treat the people who you hire as people and professionals, and hire them for being professionals instead of whatever the hell they did the last 25 years. Brian Mitchell is with us here on the Team 980. Of course, host B. Mitch and Finley over on 106.7 The Fan middays. In terms of the stadium, like, you played at RFK. You know what it was like. It's never going to be that because there's a level of nostalgia there. It's a different time. It's a different era. But as they consider that monumental move for this franchise, where do you come down on where the next stadium could be and how big of a priority location is in deciding it?
I think if they can go back to RFK, they should. And I think a lot of people want that to happen. Not only do some of the business people and the government people in D.C. want it to happen, a lot of the business people who are on the side of this football team want that to happen. And I just think that if you get the right people in place, then people will come to an agreement. But I don't think many of the government people or the politicians wanted to deal with Dan Snyder, point blank. So now you got a chance to talk about that again. If not there, why not right where they are now? There's enough room to revitalize that area and build it up into something. If you can't get the great site, RFK, you go to the next site right where they are. I just think that Dumfries, traffic is hell already. I don't want to see extra hell.
Yeah, all in favor of extra hell, raise your right hand. There are no hands up in the room. B. Mitch, appreciate the time, sir, on short notice. Have a great weekend, and we'll look forward to hearing what you and JP have to say on Monday.
All right, great. Take care of yourself, man. Be cool.
You too. Brian Mitchell, everybody with us here on The Hoffman Show. We get back, we'll take more of your calls, 301-230-0980. Your reaction to the news that Josh Harris has entered an official sale agreement with Dan Snyder to buy the Washington Commanders. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls, 301-230-0980. Your thoughts on Dan Snyder finally coming to an agreement with Josh Harris. It's official. It is signed. It is just pending league approval. Now, there are hurdles still to be worked through over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully it's just weeks. Maybe it'll be months. TBD. We'll see. But ultimately, we do have an signed agreement, and I think that seems pretty important. Today's the day that we finally hear from the Snyders and from Harris, by the way, that there is a sale that is pending that league approval, the final step before it's done. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. Let's go to those phone lines. Scott's in Silver Spring. Scott, what's up, man? You're on the Hoffman Show. What's going through your head on this Friday?
Oh, it's Christmas on May 12th, man. It's Christmas on May 12th. I couldn't be happier. I'm happy we're just going to be able to focus on football now and not all the off the field stuff. And I guarantee you, watch how fast the stadium deal gets done now. We'll probably get to choose where we want to be. And I believe that. Great riddance, Dan. That's all I got to say. Bye.
Thanks, Scott.
But
yeah, go ahead.
He's taking $6 billion. He's not leaving unhappy now.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's saying, oh, he had to sell. Yeah, well, he had to sell at like a 700% profit. So, good for him, but great riddance.
Scott, thanks for the call. A couple of things to react to there. Again, more. Sorry, just got a message from someone that we were trying to book on the show. Probably shouldn't say who that one is, but we could have a really big guest next week, so that's cool. A couple of things to react to from Scott's call. One, the stadium part in terms of choosing where we should get to choose. That's how it should have been all along. It is. There are so many things that would be so funny if they weren't sad and I didn't actually care about them and they weren't important, and that all of you listening didn't care about if they weren't important. And the stadium location is one of them. Dan Snyder likes to fancy himself a businessman. He's like, yeah, I'm a businessman. I businessed my business into buying the football team, and now, look how much it's worth. I'm the business guy. This goober had 3 jurisdictions to pick from, okay? And we're not talking San Francisco, the Niners, when they wanted to build their stadium. We're probably going between, somewhere, let's say, Marin County, north of San Francisco, San Francisco and Santa Clara, or San Jose, or, they had a lot of land out there in the Bay Area, for sure. But they... at the end of the day, it was all the state of California, all, a lot of local jurisdictions. They don't have nearly as much power and ability to gain and gather capital like a state entity does. This team not only had 2 states in Virginia and Maryland that desperately, for most of the time that Dan was the owner of the team, wanted to host this franchise, but the District of Columbia as well. Muriel Bowser has basically, since they changed the name, been all in on trying to get the team back to RFK. She has been one of the great advocates for that, if you think that great is the proper adjective there. She has been an advocate for it. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess depends on your point of view. But he had not 1, not 2, 3. Give it the old Anthony. We give it the Steph Curry. Boom, 2, 3. Count that 3. You see, he had the 4-point play the other night. He hit a 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
I like JaVale McGee's celebration a little bit more.
What's JaVale do?
I think he goes 1, 2, 3, and then I don't know.
Kisses the fingers or something.
Yeah, something like
JaVale McGee's a weird dude. I'm happy that his career worked out, and I think he's still in the league, isn't he?
Yes, he was with the Mavs, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think that's right. Didn't think in the Dan Snyder show we'd get to JaVale McGee, but here we are. That's our show. If you don't like it, please stay. Please clap. That's a deep cut. Anyway, the point is, this goober, Daniel M. Snyder, had 3 jurisdictions bidding against each other for this team. And he was so toxic. He was so bad. He was so bad at business. He was so bad at employing people. He was so bad at being a decent human being that none of them wanted to play ball. And so I agree with Scott that Josh Harris will be able to get this done quickly. There's a lot of local power. A guy like Mitchell Rales is obviously super influential. Eric Schmidt is a guy who's probably very well connected on Capitol Hill because of his Google days. Like there's a lot of people who know a lot of people, and they can get that RFK land if it can possibly be gotten. Not to mention D.C. and Virginia provide a lot of leverage. So those 2 jurisdictions will certainly enter the fight, and D.C. is going to have to move quickly if they really want to get this done. The other thing, though, Ant, that I think is interesting that I am very curious about, I know where I sit on this, and it goes back to what Yates was talking about. Like, is this a moral victory, right, if you will? It feels like the good guys won. As much as it is about football and about winning and all that, the good guys won.
Oh, definitely a moral victory. We all know the kind of guy that Dan Snyder is, and it also just speaks more to his character, the fact that he doesn't want this Mary Jo White investigation to get out. But we're finally here, and I think it does take the Megan Embers of the world and people like her to like really come forward and put the pressure on guys like Dan Snyder. I think these guys have continuously gotten away with these types of things, so. Of course, it's a moral victory, and it's also just a victory for the Commanders fan base as a whole. We can finally be able to like move forward and get this cloud that is, Dan Snyder off of us.
So that's the thing. That's actually what I wanted to say. And by the way, Megan will join Chris Russell tonight at 7:45. I was actually talking with Megan. I was thinking about having her on today. I think we're gonna have Melanie Coburn on Monday. And then while we were booking stuff, Chris already had texted Megan. So I'm excited that Megan's on the station tonight. She deserves her flowers. But what I want to say is we're not done yet, right? And we're mostly done. And I think there can be an emotional separation now. And I hope that's what happens. Here's what I would suggest to people who have been, can you just talk about football the whole time? We're not quite done with Dan. But now when we talk about Dan, when the Mary Jo White report comes out, when some of these lawsuits are finalized, you don't have to feel like it's an attack on your team. Sure, it's radio time that we could dedicate to talking about the quarterback situation for the 852nd time in the last 42 days. But now it doesn't feel like an attack, and you can have a separation where the thing that you hold dear, where if Commanders fan is the first thing you have in your Twitter bio, and is that essential to your identity? Well, now I can trash Dan Snyder, and it doesn't feel like an attack on you. It's the former guy. And you might be annoyed by it, but it's important that we get that accountability. Dan Snyder shouldn't get to walk away, like Scott, the caller, said. Dan Snyder shouldn't be able to walk away with $6 billion. It'll be $5 billion because he's $1 billion in debt. After taxes, he only gets to keep about $2 billion. He shouldn't get to walk away with billions of dollars and be off the hook. That's not really how accountability works. Okay, fine, I'll sell my asset and give up this thing so I can go live on my yacht and have you guys never talk about me again. No. That's way too easy. That's not accountability. That doesn't actually change the system at all. He needs to have the full reading of his sins before he gets to go away. Now, the good part is, again, it doesn't have to affect the football team anymore. We can just say, yeah, okay, this happened. We're going to talk about it because this is the former owner. Thank God we don't have to deal with this day-to-day anymore. Thank God this might not affect this isn't going to affect the football budget because Dan's paying a gigantic fine. Thank God this thing, that thing isn't affecting the Commanders anymore. But it's still going to be a story. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to listen to anybody who says don't talk about it. And that's not to say I'm going to sit here and start the show every day. We wait for the Mary Jo White report. We wait for the Mary Jo White. Like, that's not going to be a daily occurrence. But when it drops, you're damn sure we're going to talk about it. Because the same people that just freed your beloved franchise, Megan Imbert, Emily Applegate, Melanie Coburn, etc., they deserve that. They deserve the truth and the transparency. And by the way, no matter what that report says, right? That's the thing about transparency. That's the thing about whatever level of journalism that it is we're doing on this talk show. Not the highest level. We occasionally dip into it. We certainly bring high-level journalists like Adon Van Natta on, and I try to be fair, and I try to be accurate and all those things, even when giving opinions, right? This is opinion journalism. But it's not like I'm going to win a Pulitzer for the show. But the thing about journalism is, and the thing about truth is, and the thing about facts are, they are what they are. I think I know what happened based off of lots of reporting and lots of information and lots of testimony. If Mary Jo White finds something else, I will simply say Mary Jo White found this, and that will be that. So I think that, no matter how this goes, we've spent so much time on it, we've been so interested on it, we deserve to know, and it's important that we know so that there's kind of a warning shot to anybody else who might be trying something similar so that it doesn't happen again. Because that's the other thing about truth and transparency. It's not just reactive. It is also preventative. It is educational. It's a chance to talk about important things and make sure that people understand where the lines are so that bad behavior doesn't repeat itself. And also, by the way, in this particular case, getting rid of the person who is accused of the bad behavior will lead to more competent leadership and a hell of a lot more fun for the football fans of Washington, D.C. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, more of your calls, 301-230-0980.
This is DC's home for Maryland.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I think we might be joined by 4 or 5 minutes by Peter Rosenberg in 10 minutes. That sounds like a good get, right, Anthony? I would take 5 minutes with Rosenberg.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna finish this text message while I ask Anthony. Anthony, I haven't got your opinion on all this. When you saw the news, when we were playing our interview with Don Van Natta earlier, besides going, I can't believe we're playing a taped interview right now. What was your reaction to it?
I mean, I'm just glad we no longer have to talk about Dan Snyder. I don't know if people are aware, but when we talk about Dan Snyder, I don't really have much to say because I feel as though I end up just repeating what my feelings and my emotions about Dan Snyder himself. So I'm just glad that I won't have to talk about him, but also I just think we'll be able to, hopefully turn things over on the field. I think that's what most fans have wanted, the last 20, 25 years. And this is probably like the biggest day in DC sports history since we last won our last Super Bowl. Which was that, 1991?
Last one was it was after that, I believe. I also always get confused. All right, we're gonna call Rosenberg, by the way, in 10 minutes. So, set a timer. Hey Siri, remind me in 10 minutes to call Rosenberg. All right, actually 9 minutes. 9 minutes on the dot. So at 6:43, Anthony.
Yes,
I'm gonna send you.
Seconds.
Do you have his number?
I would much greatly appreciate if you send me his number.
Okay, I think this is the one that we want. We're gonna do this. It'd be really bad if I just Actually, all right. We're gonna. Can you text me the hotline number? I love that we're doing this over the air, but this is a breaking news day. This is how this happens. That way he's going to call us. So just text me the hotline number and make sure it works. Test it because I've given people that number and it's crapped out on us recently. Not that I probably should have said that over the air, but let's make sure. It is, to your point though, it is, I am so curious to see how quickly the team moves on, the franchise moves on, and also what is kind of the reaction internally. It is a really bizarre place for the franchise because it is the most important thing that's happened since he bought the freaking team. It's like, oh, we got a new owner. It's cool. Nothing, obviously there's been a lot of terrible things that have happened. There's been a couple of good things that have happened, the magical RG3 season. But with the benefit of hindsight, clearly the most important thing that's happened and the best day that we think has happened is today. We are as close as we've been to Dan Snyder being gone. And so if that's the case, that is something worth celebrating. But if you're the team, you can't celebrate it. Right? It's not like Josh Harris is going to get in there and be like, all right, social media team, good job on your schedule release video. Now let's do the Dan's Gone video. That's just not that. We can do that. We probably should. Anthony, what kind of video can we produce? Rachel's actually asking me about if you wanted to produce a schedule release video, what would be your theme? Would you go out? I love what the Titans did, all that kind of stuff. The Chargers obviously have been killing it. A schedule release type video, except for the owner's gone. We're gonna have to put our heads together on this.
Yeah.
Dear creative department, be creative. But it is that kind of weird thing where I hope the team doesn't treat us like children, right? You're allowed to say it's a new era. Now, the irony is if they have a bad season and there's changes on the coaching staff, you're going to have a new era followed by a new era, right? You'll have it's a new era of Commanders football with head coach John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt, right, next year. New quarterback Caleb Williams, fingers crossed, right? Maybe it's just new era this year, the Josh Harris era. begins, and Ron Rivera actually has built a good roster, and Sam Howell is awesome, and maybe they just move forward. But it is kind of a bizarre, like, middle place where the team is in, where you don't want to dump on Dan, or not you don't want to, because, like, I'm sure there are plenty of people that work there that would love to let loose on Dan Snyder. He has underpaid them. He's made their lives miserable. He's under-resourced them, all those things. But at the end of the day, like, they're not going to go out and just trash this dude on their own accord. The official team account's not going to tweet out or put out Instagram videos of like, celebration. And to a point, they can't even capture the celebration, right? Like, they can't put stuff out there that's like, hey, fans are celebrating. They can't have an official party at the RFK site. Like, I saw one of the big Twitter groups that does, like, one of the big Twitter spaces, the 54th. I think they're headed out to the RFK, like, soccer fields, and they're going to grill out and go live, and, like, shout out to those guys who've had me on their Twitter spaces before. That's awesome. Like, I wish that, I'm doing the show from home today off my little Comrex unit. I'm like, let me attach the little antenna and let me go out there, just bike through DC. Hey, what do you think about Dan Snyder? So, do that, and then get out to RFK and, be with fans. And I know, luckily for Grant and Danny across the hall and down the dial, like, those guys happen to be at Old Ox Brewery today. That was it was not something that was planned for this type of announcement. It was just on the heels of the schedule stuff yesterday. And lo and behold, they're out there today, and they're with a bunch of fans, and they're selling the Buy Dan beer, and, like, that's awesome. And there's going to be so many people that do stories and talk about it and capture this joy, and the team's just kind of got to be like, yeah, we're waiting for the official vote. We have no further comment at this time. Yeah, we have no further comment at this time. Yes, the Josh Harris press conference will be on June blah blah at blah blah o'clock. Thank you. We look forward to your attendance. Like, it's just a weird spot for them, but I do think that there will be, like, my guess is training camp, assuming that this is all done, which is not, like, just because of the complexity of the finances and stuff and all the limited partners, like, who knows? I still think this thing's going to be provisionally agreed upon in a couple weeks, and then and this is purely speculation. I have no inside information, and then we'll find out. We'll get, like, a final vote in June, July. But I think by training camp and all that kind of stuff, there is a chance to do some new era type of stuff. And I will also say, like, if I'm Jason Wright, I've probably thought about these things a lot. If I am the new ownership, I would have, or sorry, if I'm the new ownership and I talk to Jason Wright and those people, like, I'd ask them, like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, you have a pulse of the fan base, or at least you should. Like, what do you make of this idea of celebrating it versus not? And I just think that they're, the team itself as an organization is kind of in this holding pattern now. But, then there's this, kind of important versus interesting thing that Ron Rivera's got to deal with, where it's both. Like, he now officially is going to have a new boss, and he's going to have meetings and stuff over the next, whenever the sale's done. I mean, for Ron, the best thing that probably happens is it happens after minicamp, or it happens, like, right at the end of minicamp, where Josh can come in, meet the team. Like, Magic could be there, right? Go watch practice. And it's the final couple days of minicamp. There's kind of an introductory press conference. He gets to meet the team. He gets to meet some of the key players. Magic gets to talk to the team. And then you ultimately, have the media press conference and stuff. And then they got to quietly work over the summer with what their plan is for the rest of the year. And Ron can talk to Harris and Rails and whoever else is going to be more involved day to day about, this is what we've done. This is my plan. This is what I want to see moving forward. These are the things that I do, that I don't. And it's just, until then, you just kind of got to do business as usual. You got to try to, create the best football environment for your team. But that's the other thing, too, is, like, if I'm Ron Rivera, I probably have some level of a wish list. It's like, hey, nice to meet you. Thanks for buying the team. I'm glad that you that you're here. We have some stuff we got to buy. We got some sleds. We got a digital this, a program that other teams are using that we're at a competitive disadvantage. And if you can get it to us by August or July when we get started with training camp, that would be great. Okay, thanks. How much does it cost? How much did you just spend on the team? Oh, that's $6.05 billion. What's another couple million on top of that? Can we have the shiny toy, please? Please. But I do think, obviously, for Ron too, for his job security, he's talked about what he wants to do in terms of getting the getting ownership on board with the vision. This is what I want. This is what I've been doing. This is what I'm trying to be doing. And then Jason's got to do the same thing on the business side. But, the news today, of course, that Josh Harris has officially agreed to buy the Washington Commanders from Dan Snyder. There are statements and everything. Peter Rosenberg's going to join us any moment now to react real quick. Oh, I think Peter just called in. So, of course, Peter, longtime Commanders fan, D.C. resident, now on Hot 97 and ESPN 98.7 in New York, part of the Michael Kay Show in the afternoon. He's literally in a commercial break right now, so we have him for roughly 4 minutes. Rosenberg, what's up, man?
Woo! Well, let me tell you something. I have about 15 minutes left of airtime. I already have finished a drink. I'm in the zone, boys. I'm in the zone.
When you saw the news, by the way, were you on the air? I can't remember what time your show starts. Were you on the air when you got the news?
Yes, I was on the air when I got the news. I actually just threw up a tweet. It's on my account at Rosenberg Radio, and it's on my Instagram. I threw up a tweet of the moment it happened because we're on TV as well up here on the Yes Network. And so Michael Kay started reading. He said, I got something for you. And I said, I know what you're going to read. You're going to read Schefter's tweet. And then he read the Snyders statement, which I had not seen yet. And for some reason, while it was cool to see the Schefter tweet, I don't know how you guys felt, something just hit different when you saw the Snyder statement.
Yeah, that's kind of where we've been all day, Peter, is that, like, hearing from them and hearing from Harris makes it feel so much more official, even though I've been told this whole time, like, no, this is real, it's happening. There was something about hearing from them. And so how was that for you different than, say, what we went through on April 13th when the first report that it was going to be Harris came out?
Listen, I have believed the whole time that it was going to happen. I'm just seeing the Magic Johnson statement now as well. I had believed the whole time it was going to happen. It was just a matter of time. I tried not to focus on it too much, just wait and see. But for some reason, listen, you're just always thinking. For me, it was impossible to believe it was ever going to happen. I had sort of reconciled, guys. Like I'm older. I've been a fan of this team since 87. And I had given up on ever escaping this ownership group because Dan is only like 10 years older than me. So I was just like, this is it. This is my lifetime as a fan. I will always have Snyder. I will always have to have sort of this asterisk. When people ask me who my favorite team is, I always have to say, it's Washington. And they give you this kind of look of like the sheepish, sad look that you root for this team. And to be honest, between the name change and now, especially because of this, I really feel like I'm going to be able to be proud to say I'm a fan. And it's been a very, very long time since I felt that way. The history of bad luck, and it's so many things. And guys, some of this goes beyond Snyder's decision making. Some of it is like whether or not you believe in karma. I'm talking about things that go well beyond his control. I'm talking about the death of Sean Taylor. I'm talking about just a run that has been so horrible and sad. Some of it being on-field play, some of it being much deeper than that. It's been sad and miserable. I didn't think it would ever end. And to hear it today that it's actually happening was pretty unbelievable.
No doubt. I know you got to get back to your show for the final segment. I presume you guys are just like talking a bunch of Knicks heat. So have fun with that.
That is exactly right. We are getting people ready for that game right now. But my mind is certainly back in the DMV, man. Thank you for giving me the chance. And to all my DMV people, this is This is such a fantastic time. I'm trying to get back on that season ticket list. I passed it up when it came around a few years ago. I think now it's time, man, especially once they get out of that hellhole that we call FedEx Field. But you know what? For some reason, Craig, I feel like FedEx is even going to feel better next year. I don't know why, but somehow it's going to feel just a little bit better than it did in previous years.
I think you hit on something that is so right, which is that little bit of shame that you say when, like, I'm a Washington fan, and that look people give you won't happen anymore. And even that will make FedEx feel better. We can talk longer next week if you want. We can go longer, but you got a show to do, so appreciate it.
I would love that. Thanks, man. Have a good weekend.
You too. Peter Rosenberg checking in with us, and we'll try to reconnect with Rosenberg. I'll tape something before both of our shows go on the air. Although we found out today, Anthony, how dangerous taping interviews can be because, well, sometimes news breaks. But we can talk to Rosenberg next week on a longer segment. As for right now, quick break, come back. Maybe we'll hit something on real things. Maybe we'll just kind of wrap up our thoughts from the day, see how much time we have left. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It is the Fridayest of Fridays. Dan Snyder has agreed to sell the Commanders to Josh Harris. Official sale agreement in place now. Of course, we wait for the league to approve it. That could happen as soon as 10 days from now, Minneapolis. More reporting seems to indicate that it's going to be later than that. Let me see what else we got. And by the way, do we have anything? Here, someone just tagged me in Rosenberg's video, so I'll have to check that out. That could be a fun real things on Monday, Anthony. We get some reaction from around the thing. Do we have anything, by the way, for real things today?
I have a couple of things.
Okay. Anything particularly good?
I need to check the folder for real.
Okay. While you do that, real quick, Steve Apostolopoulos put out a statement. The Canadian billionaire who was also bidding on the team says, on behalf of my brothers Jim and Peter, I'd like to thank Dan and Tanya Snyder, the NFL and Bank of America, for a very open, transparent, and enjoyable process of exploring the purchase of the Washington Commanders. I could not have been more impressed with the opportunity and people involved, and know the Commanders will continue to be a foundational franchise in the NFL. This process, he's Canadian. This process has strengthened my resolve to acquire a professional sports franchise, and I look forward to finding the opportunity that is right for me and my family. Thank you to everyone involved on my team for their hard work and dedication over the last few months. Best wishes to the Snyders as they embark upon a new path, and best wishes to Josh Harris and his partners as they set out to take over a storied franchise and make its fans both happy and proud. So that is from there. Let's see. Anything else? Joe Gibbs weighed in today. This can kind of be real things. We don't need to play the sounder today, Anthony, because I'm guessing we only have 90 seconds left in the show, our usual out time. I guess it doesn't matter. What I should do, I should go to 6:58 because that's what Russell does to me every bleeping day of the week.
He's listening too, so.
Yeah. By the way, Chris Russell is coming up at 7 o'clock. We're live and local till at least 11 tonight. Scott Jackson will be with you starting at 9. Statement from Joe Gibbs. I've had the opportunity to get to know Josh Harris and the leadership team during this process and fully support his efforts to lead the new ownership group of the Commanders. The NFL has grown a great deal since my time as a coach in this league, but what hasn't changed is my belief that with great leadership from the top, the drive to win on the field, and a commitment to culture, championship teams are created. Josh and his team share these values, and I am committed to doing what I can to reconnect this great franchise to the community, fan base, and alumni. That from Joe Gibbs. Ultimately, final thought from me is this. We are one step closer to the end that should have happened a long time ago. I will continue to go back to this refrain because I think it is the correct refrain, if you will. This could have been a lot easier. This whole thing did not have to happen. If the NFL had had foresight years ago, they would have never let Dan Snyder buy this team in the first place. If Dan Snyder had not been the person that he was, if he had been someone who genuinely had the best interest of the franchise in mind, who had run the franchise with intelligence, compassion, empathy, wit, anything resembling a positive quality of any kind, this would not have been the way it's been for the last 25 years. Alas, it did not. It took a lot of people getting hurt to end this thing, and it took those people fighting back. And for that reason, we are forever indebted to them. That said, as we close some of the loose ends, there's still some that will be closed over the weeks, months, and years to come. Federal investigations don't care about a franchise sale. We get to finally move forward. We get to be a regular sports talk town that talks about football and actually what happens on the field, as opposed to having to worry about what's happening up in the owner's box. We'll talk to you guys again on Monday. We'll probably do some schedule stuff since we didn't today. But as for tonight, Chris Russell is next. I'm Craig Hoffman. Have a great, joyous, and celebratory weekend, DC.
The